Hey loves, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Health My Friend. I am Abby Mallard. I am a nutrition educator, a food relationship coach, and I work with my clients to help them build healthy relationships with food and exercise and themselves. I think that it's really, really important to take care of ourselves well in a world that is crazy. um, and part of that is learning to love ourselves, learning how to take care of ourselves, learning how to appreciate who we are, learning how to show up as our true selves, and also learning how to take care of our health, mental health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, all of those things. And that's what we talk about on this podcast. So if you're new here, welcome. If you've been here a while, thanks for sticking around. Um, I'm grateful to have you, grateful to be here. Let's get into it today. All right, so for this week's article, if you don't know, I write a weekly article for a beautiful nonprofit called Unhurry. And those articles are always up on my website every week if you're interested in reading them. But this week for the article, I wrote about um, beating yourself up and feeling like a failure and feeling defeated when you take steps backwards in a healing journey. So, how many of you have experienced that shame, that defeat, that feeling of just failure, like you messed up, feeling alone when you're on a healing journey of any sort, and you've been having like a lot of really good days, making a lot of progress, and then you have a moment where you feel like you just really effed up, like you just fell off the wagon, you reverted to old habits, you did something that you really did not want to do, something that you've been working to stop, and you just felt so awful and bad and shamed inside. I think probably a lot of us have experienced that. Um, I think it's a pretty common thing to experience. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about healing, how healing isn't linear. We're going to talk about how you can have some grace for yourself in those moments, and some of what I've experienced in that feeling as well. My goal is to always help you make yourself a priority and have grace with yourself, and also to know that you're not alone. So I will always be real on here and always sharing my own personal journey and struggles as well. Um, I think that a lot of us feel this way, especially when it comes to health. Um, I see this a lot with my clients who I work with, um, when they are working on their health journey and working on whatever specific goal that they have, whether it's losing weight, whether it's sticking to a nutrition plan, whether it's working out a certain amount of times a week, whatever their goal is. People are so fired up and excited and proud of themselves and feel accomplished when they're sticking to the plan really well, when they're, doing all the right things, right in quotation marks. And then they have, a bad day, or maybe over the weekend, they kind of fell off the wagon, as they like to call it, or, swayed a little from the nutrition plan, or maybe didn't get to the gym quite as many times as they wanted. And so then they start to feel bad. Okay, so it's like this immediate switch from, oh, I'm doing really good. I am sticking to the plan. I'm taking care of myself well. I'm making progress. Like all of this is really good. And then all of a sudden, they make one mistake in their mind is a mistake. And all of a sudden, it's just this bad feeling, this defeat, this overwhelm, the feeling that you're not going to get back on track, the feeling that you've screwed everything up, the feeling that you feel so guilty for what you ate or for what you didn't do. You feel shamed for how you're treating your body or how you're feeling about yourself. And so I want us to think through this a little. Um, I always tell my clients, and I think that this is so important, that there is no wagon. First of all, in healing and in your health journey, healing and health both are not linear. They are constant journeys that go on throughout our whole entire lives. And there are lots of ups and downs. There are lots of steps forward and steps backwards. And when we're making that progress forward, we feel really good. When we're making progress in the direction that we want to go, we feel really good. We feel really accomplished. But then when we start to maybe take a couple steps backwards, when we hit a little bit of a down, we start to feel really bad, really shameful, really defeated, really overwhelmed. I think it's normal to feel that way. I really do. And there's nothing wrong with feeling different emotions and feeling sadness or feeling overwhelmed. But I want you to have grace for yourself and to realize that in those moments of downs or in those moments of steps backwards, that's not immediate failure. That's not making you a failure. That's not throwing you completely off track. You're not off the wagon. There is no wagon. The wagon is bullshit. And but we make such a big deal of it in our heads, and we think that if we don't keep going forward, that we're not going to get to where we want to be. And so I want you to remember, in your health journey, in your healing journey, whatever it is that you're working on, you're going to keep making progress if you keep showing up for yourself. You're going to keep making progress if you keep showing up for yourself. Even if showing up for yourself is in a down moment, is in a moment where you feel like you've taken a step back. Even if it's showing up for yourself when you're feeling really defeated and really sad. The time where you're going to stop making progress is when you give up, is when you give in to that feeling of defeat and that feeling of falling off the wagon and that feeling of that you've screwed everything up, and so you just stop. That's the only time that you're going to stop making progress, is when you give up on yourself. And so that's why I am so passionate and intent about changing that script of the wagon, of being on this never this thing, whatever it is, that doesn't allow for any grace or any mistakes. If you're going about your healing or your health in a way that doesn't allow you to make any mistakes, then I don't think that you're approaching it in a very healthy or loving way. If you're being so hard on yourself that you have to make progress every single freaking day and you're not allowed to have any bad days or any bad moments, I don't think you're loving yourself well. And I think that the times when we make the most progress and see the most healing and feel the most healthy are when we're showing up for ourselves in a loving way. It's when we're showing up for ourselves in the hard, in the bad, in the down moments. It's when we're showing up for ourselves and still going, even when we feel like we've messed up. And it's when we show up in a way that's loving ourselves, that allows ourselves to make mistakes. So approaching your health journey, approaching your healing journey, knowing that, you know what, it's not always going to be perfect, because life isn't perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. No one's perfect. So it's not going to be perfect. But I'm going to keep showing up and keep taking care of myself and keep doing the best that I can, because that's all that anyone ever asks of me. All I ever ask of myself is for the best that I can do and to show up in that way. I think when we approach it in that way, instead of feeling like we always have to be perfect, we have a little less of that defeat and that shame and that guilt and that sadness when we maybe mess up or screw up in a way that we feel like we shouldn't have done. Now, have struggled personally with eating disorders. I'm really open about this. That's what my articles are mainly focused around, is a healthy relationship with food, and I work on healthy relationships with food with my clients a lot of times. And I want to talk about it in the midst, or in the like in the category of struggling with an eating disorder and recovering from an eating disorder. So if you feel like you have disordered eating or you've struggled with an eating disorder, um, I feel like it can be a lot harder when you're working on a healing journey with your relationship with food, especially. Also, your relationship with exercise, but especially your relationship with food if you struggle with um, an, uh, an eating disorder. It can be really hard to have grace for yourself and love yourself through healing from that. I know for me, when I was healing, I struggled with bulimia, which is eating a lot of food and then throwing up. And when I was healing, I think that I wanted to heal so badly that I didn't have grace or space for myself to have bad days or to mess up. Um, I felt really isolated in my healing journey, even though I had a great therapist and a great dietitian and supportive family. I felt really alone in my healing. And when I would have bad days, it felt like such a defeat. It felt like I was never going to get to a place where I was going to have a healthy relationship with food, a healthy relationship with my body. Like I was never going to get to where I wanted to be. And, I'm talking about it in the form of healing from an eating disorder, but that was like my biggest pain point. I think this shows up in whatever your biggest pain point is. Maybe it's your relationship with your body. Maybe it's how you view your body. Maybe it's your relationship with exercise, um, with exercising for the right reasons. But for me, my eating disorder was the most shameful thing to me. Um, it was something that I really struggled with, something that had a lot of emotions and reasons behind it. Um, and so I felt really alone. And when I would have a hard day or maybe a slip up after a lot of good days where I wasn't really struggling, I would feel really defeated, really isolated, really alone. Um, just that feeling of like, I'm never gonna get to where I want to be. Like, I've made so much progress forward. I had all of these good days, and now I'm having this really bad day. And so now I feel like all of those good days don't count for anything. Do you resonate with that? Like when you have a bad day, do you forget about all of the good days that you've had? Just because you have one bad day or one or two bad days does not mean that all of those good days and all of that progress and all of that healing and all of those good things that you're doing for yourself have just gone out the window, that they don't count or they don't matter anymore. They still matter, they still count. You should still be very proud of yourself for those things. That's still making a difference. So I want you to remember, and something that I wish I would have known and would have been able to remind myself about when I was struggling and healing, is that just because you have one bad day does not mean that all of those good days don't count for something. Just because you have one bad day does not mean that you're not going to keep having good days. Just because you have one bad day does not mean that you're not going to get to where you want to be. And so, in healing and in health, I think it's really, really important for us to remember that a bad day, a bad moment does not equal failure. A bad day or a bad moment does not mean that you're not going to get back to or get to where you want to go. A bad day or a bad moment does not mean that those good days don't count. It's interesting, back when I was healing from my eating disorder, um, those were my big, feelings and emotions when I would have a bad day. But I see that show up for myself, not so much in the form of defeat or um, shame, but some days I feel scared. Um, I struggle with anxiety and I've had some really, really rough patches um, in my mental health. I struggle with anxiety. I used to struggle with depression. Thankfully, depression doesn't really show its face in my life anymore. Um, but because I've struggled with both of these things and because I've had such bad um, spells and like times of my life where it's just been so hard and so consuming, some days when I feel really anxious or when I feel kind of down and sad and depressed, I catch myself, um, first of all, I catch myself trying to like avoid the feeling and not acknowledge it and not sit with it or, not focus on it because I don't want anything to do with it. Like it's not a nice thing for me. I don't think any of us really like depression or anxiety, but I really do not like them. And especially because I have a history with them, I do not like them. And so I catch myself like trying not to, you know, acknowledge them. But the other thing that I catch myself doing is um, I try to keep myself from feeling those things, which I've been doing a lot of work around emotions and um, being able to name and sit with and feel different emotions. And so I think that it's really important. I don't think it's healthy to push things away and not let yourself feel them. I think it's really important to feel those things and not just like try to stuff them all down inside, which is sometimes what I catch myself doing. But the other thing that I find myself doing when I'm struggling with anxiety or depression, or just having kind of like an off day, is I start to worry and I start to be fearful and scared that I'm going back to that place that I used to be. Like, if I'm feeling kind of depressed and down, like, my brain is like, oh, no, 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 you're not allowed to feel this way. And we're not allowed to do this because remember 5 years ago when you cried yourself to sleep every single night? We're not going back there. And so I catch myself like my mind and my body are like, no, we're not doing this because we don't like this. But then also in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I get scared that I'm going to go back to that place just because I'm having one bad day or moment. Same thing with anxiety. If I have a day where I feel really bad, or maybe I have a panic attack out of the blue, and it's been a really long time since I've struggled with something that intense, my brain and my body are like, nope, we can't do this because remember a year ago when you like were shaking physically all day long and couldn't eat and couldn't take care of yourself and couldn't get your mind to calm down, like you felt like you were going crazy, we're not going back there. And in my mind, I'm like, I start to feel scared and fearful that I'm going to go back to that place where I was really, really struggling. It's like when I'm having one bad day or one bad moment or one just really like struggling session or day or week or whatever, however long it shows up in, I start to get really fearful that I'm going to go back to those places that I used to be. And I think that's what happens a lot of times when we're on a health journey or on a healing journey is that we feel like it's a lot of different emotions. And so I would challenge you to kind of evaluate what or how it shows up for you. Like, do you get that shame and that guilt and that defeated feeling? Or do you get that scared and fearful feeling of, oh no, I don't want to go back to that place? I think it shows up for us in different ways at different times in our lives, and then also just depending on what it is that we're struggling with. Um, but the biggest thing to remember is that just because you're having one bad day or you're struggling does not mean that all of the healing and the progress that you've made is discounted for. It does not mean that all of those good days are just going to go away. You're still going to have good days, even if you're having a shitty day today. Like, just because one day is bad does not mean that there aren't good days ahead of you. And the one thing that I also always remind myself when I start to feel like that fear of going back to that place is I remind myself, okay, you know what? That's probably not going to happen. But if it does, if, big if it does, I healed and moved through that before. I got to a much better place. I'm in a much better place. So if I did it once, I can do it again. And if I really, really end up back in that bad place of depression, um, I'll get the help that I need and I'll get the medications that I need. And I will work through that and I will get to a better place. Or, if I start to really, really struggle with anxiety again, it's okay. I can up my meds. I can see a therapist more often. I will use the tools that I have learned and also learn new tools to help myself get to a better place again. Remind yourself in those moments that, first of all, you're not alone because everyone struggles with these things. We just don't talk about it. And so you're not alone in your struggle. There is someone else who struggles also. And two, remind yourself that just because you're having a bad day does not mean that you're not going to have more good days. And three, remind yourself that the wagon is bullshit. And four, remind yourself that if you get to a bad place again, you will be able to get yourself back to a healthy place. With the help and the resources that you need, you will be able to move through that pain and that struggle just like you did before. And you're going to get to a healthier place and you're going to make the progress and end up where you want to be. Just don't ever give up on yourself. Don't give up on yourself. So I hope that this helped you today. I hope that the next time you're feeling overwhelmed or defeated or sad or anxious, that you'll remember that you're not alone. I am always here if you need anything. But also remember that you are beautiful and you're worth taking care of. And just because you have a bad day or a couple bad days does not mean that you're not going to make more progress forward. Remember that healing and health are not linear. There are lots of ups and downs, and it's okay to have both. And have grace with yourself. Have a lot of grace with yourself. Love yourself through it. Show up for yourself from a loving place. Allow yourself to have bad days. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Allow yourself to feel all those feelings. There's nothing wrong with that. And as always, keep showing up in this world, taking up space. And I am here for you. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to y'all next Tuesday.